Almost before there was anything else on the face of the earth, there were bugs. And while they may be small, there's no question that bugs and insects have had a huge impact on mankind. For most of recent memory, they've been content to behave themselves and fulfill their assigned roles in the ecological pecking order. But now this puzzler. Why, as we find ourselves at the dawn of the 21st century, do we seem to be facing a veritable invasion of these tiny creatures? Not by one species, but many. Why here, and why now are we experiencing a sudden attack of some of the most destructive and deadly bugs and insects ever to crawl the earth?
Experts have issued a dire warning. The surge of certain insect populations constitutes a global health threat that will affect worldwide populations for the next 20 years. What has caused the rise of this unexpected peril? Can we blame it on the birds and the bees? Or have humans actually constructed some of the world's most deadly plagues? Is this nature's human population control system at work? Or could it be that man's own sinister hand is at the controls of this deadly phenomena? Is it possible there are ancient predictions and religious prophecies that explain what all of this means?
Recently, many of the world's smallest inhabitants have proved themselves to be deadly and destructive, and they appear to be getting more so. Is there some identifiable reason we are now in the midst of a lethal insect and virus invasion that many experts fear is impossible to stop? We'll look at the chilling possibilities in just a moment. And in part 2 of this episode, for more than 30 years, the world has witnessed the mystery of the crop circle. The often beautiful but always baffling markings appearing in farmers' fields all over the planet.
Is it really possible for the increasingly complex crop circles to be the work of hoaxers? Can these complicated designs be constructed in just a matter of a few hours in complete darkness? Have recent crop circles revealed a tantalizing glimpse of their origin and even suggest, as some believe, that we have in fact made the long-awaited contact?
The surprising answer in part 2 of this episode. But for now, let's examine the possibility of a plague of deadly insects.
We all go through life accepting what textbooks told us about the universe. But what happens when questions are raised about many of our fundamental beliefs? A mystery that cannot be explained. An enigma that defies reason. A surprising and unexpected answer. To encounter such a mystery firsthand may change your life forever. Face to face with the greatest riddles of the ages, the world's most profound mysteries reach out and touch your life in ways you've never imagined possible. Encounters with the Unexplained.
In the latter half of the 20th century, many scientists thought the world's most infectious diseases were under control. But it now appears that not only are old ailments re-emerging, but newer ones are blossoming into full-blown epidemics, many of them spread by lowly but deceptively dangerous insects. Typically, they come out of the night to attack their victims in a quest for blood. While that may sound like a description of Count Dracula, what we're talking about, in fact, is a deadly, real-life bloodsucker, the mosquito.
Some disease-causing microbes are transmitted to humans by the air that we breathe or contact through our skin, by the water that we drink or touch, or by the foods that we eat. Another group of microbes is transmitted or vectored to humans by members of the animal kingdom, frequently by insects. These types of illnesses are known as vector-borne diseases. Historically, these diseases have included malaria, yellow fever, typhus, and plague. The current undisputed king of vector-borne death is the mosquito. It has probably killed more human beings throughout history than any other animal. What they bring to your summer picnic is more than a little irritating itch. They also carry malaria, yellow fever, dengue, and several types of encephalitis. These diseases were once quite common in the United States. They've largely disappeared due to screening, sanitation, air conditioning, and organized mosquito control programs. In terms of raw numbers and deaths, malaria is the worst disease transmitted by mosquitoes. Since it was first identified in the early 20th century, billions have been infected by it and tens of millions have died from it. Has it been defeated by modern medicine? Not by a long shot. Currently, outbreaks of malaria occur in all of Central and South America, throughout the Middle East, in China, India, Southeast Asia, and the Philippines. It is the second largest killer in sub-Saharan Africa after AIDS. The World Health Organization estimates there are 300 to 500 million clinical cases of malaria each year, resulting in between 1.5 and 2.7 million deaths. That's one death every 10 seconds. One of every 17 children dying this year will die from malaria. Of the 4 human types of malaria, one can be fatal, and there is another that stays in the body long afterwards and can produce recurring symptoms. There is no effective vaccination and none likely in the years to come.
Unfortunately, malaria is far from the only serious disease transmitted by the mosquito. One of the newly emerging and rapidly expanding illnesses spread by the insect is the West Nile virus. Few new illnesses have so quickly grabbed headlines and seized the attention of the medical community like this deadly disease. But how did it get to American shores? And how far will it spread?
West Nile virus is the most geographically widespread disease of its kind. It's been detected on all continents that have temperate zones. First reported in Uganda in 1937, epidemics have occurred in Israel, the Balkans, Russia, and elsewhere. No one knows exactly how it arrived in the United States. Infected birds imported to American zoos, migrating birds, or stowaway mosquitoes. Once here, however, our mosquitoes then picked up the disease while birds dispersed it. Bird populations of crows, gulls, pigeons, jays, and even red-tailed hawks were the first group of animals to be affected by this virus. Ironically, it's the birds that are responsible for spreading this disease. Certain birds, once infected, can allow the virus to multiply in their blood, making it easier for mosquitoes to acquire and spread to other birds, horses, and humans. When these birds migrate, they take the virus into new areas. When an uninfected mosquito bites the bird host, it picks up the virus and then spreads it to its next victim. It's not possible, however, to contract the disease from another animal, bird, or human being. Only mosquitoes do that dirty deed. West Nile virus made its first appearance in the United States in 1999. It has now been identified in 27 states and the District of Columbia and is spreading south to Florida, north to Ontario, Canada, and even east on Long Island. Currently spreading westward from Missouri and Arkansas, we now expect it to reach the Rocky Mountains and maybe beyond in 2002. The elderly, the chronically ill, and those with weakened immune systems are most at risk for developing and dying from the brain inflammation caused by West Nile virus.
Let's turn to a more friendly insect. The honeybee has been known to produce a nasty sting occasionally, but by and large we have viewed them as friends, pollinating flowers and fruit trees and producing one of nature's true miracles, honey. In recent years, however, the image of the bee has been severely damaged by the presence of a distant cousin with a nasty temper, which some say was produced by humans interfering with their procreation process. It was the early immigrants and settlers in America who imported the honey-producing European bee that is now common in North America. These bees are easy to handle and produce large quantities of honey. Bees are responsible for pollinating many agricultural crops such as apples, melons, eggplants, peaches, pears, plums, prunes, avocados, and blueberries. In fact, a third of the food produced in the United States comes from plants that have been pollinated by honeybees. Since the introduction of the honey-producing bee into North America, things had been progressing nicely. Man and bee had settled into a mutually beneficial arrangement. Then something happened. There had been attacks before, of course, and even an occasional death due to bee stings, usually the result of the victim's allergy to bee venom. But nothing like this. Suddenly it seemed death by swarming bees was big news, creating a wave of fear that became another burdensome worry of modern life. Again, why? And why here? Is there a sinister origin to this disturbing trend of killer insects? Or were these developments actually foreordained and predicted centuries ago? Has mankind tampered with nature to a point where nature has simply decided to fight back? Did we enlist germs and insects to fight our wars only to get caught in an uncontrollable backfire? What has become known as the killer bee problem first emerged in the Western Hemisphere in the 1950s. Agricultural specialists in Brazil went searching for a bee that would flourish in their country's hot tropical weather. They simply intended to breed a better producing honeybee. But things didn't quite work out that way.
In 1956, geneticist Warwick Kerr, who was working on behalf of the Brazilian government, imported several colonies of African honeybees. He began breeding experiments to improve honey production of the local bees. However, a year later, 26 African queens escaped from his research lab, which was located about 100 miles south of Sao Paulo. These queens soon bred with the local bees. There were two surprises. First, the honey production from the Africanized honeybees was actually quite poor. Secondly, the hybrid bees took on the aggressive characteristics of their African ancestors. These bees soon became known as killer bees. These new bees looked practically identical to European honeybees. In fact, the venom released in the sting from a killer bee is no stronger than that from a normal honeybee. Victims of the killer bee die due to the multiple stings delivered in their frenzied attack. It's not uncommon for a victim, be it human or another animal, to be stung by these bees many hundreds of times. And the killer bees are more easily agitated than their European counterparts and respond in mass attacks. As a result of the escape of the poorly producing African honeybees, for all its good intentions and efforts, Brazil went from being 4th in the world in honey production to 27th by the early 1990s. Unfortunately, the killer bees began to move north at a rate of 50 to 200 miles per year. New colonies of bees steadily migrated up through South and Central America and into Mexico. The first colonies appeared in the United States in October of 1990 in Hidalgo, Texas. The vicious bees then colonized New Mexico and expanded into Arizona in 1993. That's the year the first death attributed to killer bees was reported in the U.S. Since tracking of the numbers was begun in 1956, it is believed the killer bees may have been responsible for 1,000 human deaths.
Entomologists may have had good intentions, but the result has been uniformly bad. What's more, there doesn't appear to be a solution. Some scientists fear that the Africanized honeybee will be able to adapt to colder winters and eventually thrive throughout North America. Other tiny but deadly creatures have already proven that in spite of their size and inability to fly, they can also spread rapidly and efficiently. The sly little deer tick, purveyor of the dreaded Lyme disease, is one of these. Lyme disease is named after the Atlantic seaside town of Lyme, Connecticut, where in the mid-1970s, 51 residents came down with what at first appeared to be rheumatoid arthritis. Instead, turned out to be an inflammatory infection caused by bacteria that live in and are transmitted by deer ticks. The highest incident of Lyme disease is still found in the Northeast, but it is also common in the north central states and on the West Coast, primarily in Northern California. In fact, occurrence of Lyme disease has increased 25-fold since surveys first began in 1982. So, just what are the medical implications of contracting Lyme disease?
Although arthritis can develop in about 25% of patients, bringing pain and swelling to the large joints, it's much more common to develop numerous problems within the nervous system. These include numbness and tingling, the onset of Bell's palsy or paralysis of the facial muscles, along with severe fatigue, muscle and joint aches, and memory and mood problems. Symptoms can also include irregularities of the heart rhythm, meningitis, dizziness, twitches, and bowel problems. Most patients in the early stages of Lyme disease can recover quickly and completely when treated with antibiotics. The problem is, Lyme disease can often be difficult to diagnose, and many symptoms are frequently misdiagnosed as flu. Consequently, some infected people are diagnosed only after more severe symptoms set in. Further complicating the diagnosis, severe late-occurring symptoms of the disease may not appear for weeks, months, or even years after the tick bite. Blood tests that can check for Lyme disease are not that reliable. Once the infection becomes chronic, it cannot be distinguished from other cases of chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia.
And there's another problem. Deer are now not the only carrier of the ticks.
In most parts of the United States, Lyme disease is spread by the deer tick. However, the Lone Star tick can spread the disease in the lower Mississippi River Valley. They don't jump or fly. They wait on vegetation for an animal or human to brush against them. Then they attempt to reach the skin, where they attach themselves by the mouth. Following a blood meal, the tick swells to 2 or 3 times its normal size, then drops to the ground. Lyme disease is the most common illness spread by ticks in the United States, and it can be treated with antibiotics. But we need better tests to help with the diagnosis of Lyme disease, and more studies on how to best treat it.
But the question remains, why this sudden and exploding infestation? So far as we know, unlike the killer bee, no one has been tampering with the tick population. Could it be that the history of the killer bee is a cautionary tale to help us bring into focus a long list of deadly results that can occur when man starts to manipulate the course of nature? The killer bee is, after all, a giant compared to some of the microscopic beasts that seem to be suddenly threatening human populations worldwide. Has man had a hand in this enigmatic rise in biological invasions?
Dating as far back as World War I, combatant governments experimented with various chemical and biological means to achieve victory. The practice continued through World War II, through the Korean War, and on up to the present day. As current as today's headlines, there are concerns